Welcome to Infinite Business Dynamics. How do massive public projects, we're talking billions of dollars, actually get the green light? And maybe more importantly, how can we be absolutely sure we're getting real value for all that money? Well, today we're going to break down a really powerful framework. It's designed specifically to prevent those incredibly costly failures and make sure these high-stakes decisions are truly built to succeed. Let's dive in. So, the first big hurdle we have to get over is, well, it's an illusion. It's this super tempting but incredibly dangerous idea that a complex, multi-billion-dollar decision can be safely boiled down to just a single number on a spreadsheet. And this right here illustrates the problem perfectly. It's something we call the mathematical illusion of value. A project can have a stellar net present value, a beautiful ROI. It can look absolutely perfect on paper. But that financial model? It's basically a house of cards if it isn't grounded in two things. First, the reality of what the supply market can actually deliver. And second, the very real risk that the project is going to fail during execution. So, the crucial point is, relying on NPV alone, that is a fatal flaw.
Okay, so if a single financial lens is flawed, what's the alternative? Well, the solution isn't some simple trick. It's actually the powerful synthesis of three distinct professional disciplines all working together. This slide really shows the three pillars of the solution. You've got finance, represented by CIPFA, you've got procurement, represented by CIPS, and you've got project management, represented by PMI. Now, when these three perspectives are fused together, they create what's known as the analytical crucible. Think of it like a rigorous testing ground where ideas are forged into sound, actually deliverable investments. Let's start with CIPFA. This brings the stewardship lens, and this is about so much more than just balancing the books. It uses what's called the 3 E's, that's economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, to make sure public money is being used wisely. It also brings in these powerful tools to benchmark options and forces a much more holistic view, weighing the financial, social, and environmental impacts all together. Next up is CIPS, which brings the supply market lens, and this is absolutely critical. It uses the iceberg model to force us to look way beyond the initial sticker price. See, that acquisition cost? That's just the tip. Under the surface, you've got these massive, often hidden costs of usage, maintenance, and eventually disposal. This perspective is what prevents disasters like suicide pricing. That's where a supplier bids an unsustainably low price just to win a contract, pretty much guaranteeing failure down the line. And that brings us to PMI, the delivery lens. This is all about execution realism. Think about it. A transformational project with perfect financials is completely worthless if it has a 90% chance of failing in delivery. PMI grounds the entire strategy in the famous iron triangle, that constant balance between time, cost, and quality. It forces us to ask the really tough question, can we actually build this? Now, even with these three lenses in place, we still have to fight against a fundamental human bias. We are all, just by our very nature, a little bit too optimistic about our own plans. You see, optimism bias is this systematic tendency for planners to underestimate costs and overestimate benefits. It's a huge trap. But this is where our trinity of disciplines provides the cure. Each one offers specific tools to push that optimistic baseline back towards reality. For example, PMI uses something called reference class forecasting, which bases estimates on the actual outcomes of similar past projects. CIPS uses should-cost modeling to build a really detailed independent price estimate. Together, they establish a truly realistic foundation. Okay, theory is one thing, but what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's look at the staggering difference between getting this wrong and getting it spectacularly right. £10 billion. Just let that number sink in for a moment. That was the estimated final cost of failure for the UK's national program for IT in the NHS. This wasn't just a budget overrun. It was a total catastrophe born from getting the fundamentals wrong, a perfect storm of siloed thinking. The failure of this program can be traced directly back to the breakdown of our three disciplines. You had a CIPS failure, the procurement was rushed, which created a hostile market with these one-sided contracts. A PMI failure, the scope was ridiculously overambitious and centrally controlled, basically breaking the iron triangle from day one. And a CIPFA failure, that initial low price was prioritized over the whole life cost and quality. It's a textbook example of one of the worst public sector fiascos in history. Now let's contrast that with a monumental success, the London 2012 Olympics. This was a true triumph of integrated planning.
The delivery authority brought all three disciplines to the table right from the very beginning. And what's so crucial here is that they proactively corrected their own optimism. They adjusted an early £2.4 billion budget to a much more realistic $9.3 billion. They just faced reality head on.
And this comparison slide really says it all, doesn't it? The NHS program was just defined by siloed thinking and hostile supplier relationships, which led to constant reactive firefighting. The Olympics, on the other hand, was built on integrated disciplines. It created a client of choice market, tracked execution closely, and made that crucial proactive budget correction. I mean, the difference is just night and day.
So, what's the final takeaway from all this? How should leaders really view this framework? So, the crucial takeaway is this. The economic case, when it's built on these principles, isn't just some bureaucratic checkbox you have to tick. It's the strategic command center for creating public value. Real success requires that fiscal stewardship of finance, the commercial wisdom of procurement, and the execution discipline of project management, all working as one. Hey, if you found this breakdown valuable, be sure to subscribe to Infinite Business Dynamics for more executive frameworks, just like this one. Thanks so much for watching.
Further reinforcing the idea.
Okay, so let's jump right in. You know how massive public projects, think new hospitals, transport links, that kind of thing, go from just being a good idea to an actual concrete plan? Well, if you've ever wondered about that, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're digging into the economic case. It's the second and absolutely crucial gate in the UK Treasury's 5-case model. Now, the first gate, the strategic case, answers the big why. Why do we need to do this at all? But the economic case asks a much harder question. Of all the possible ways to do it, which one actually creates the most value? This is really where big ambitions have to meet a very, very sharp pencil.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start by connecting that why to the how. Then we'll really unpack what value even means in this context. We'll look at the problem through 3 different professional lenses, explore the tools and common traps of this kind of analysis, and we'll even contrast a huge success with a pretty famous failure. And then finally, we'll land on what's called the preferred way forward. Sound good? Okay, let's get into it.
All right, so this is where it all begins. We're moving from a strategic ambition to some really disciplined economic thinking. The strategic case has already made a compelling argument that, change is non-negotiable. But now we're staring at a whole universe of possibilities. Do we build something brand new? Do we just make what we have better? Maybe we just change the rules or regulations. All of these different options have to be explored, compared, and tested like crazy. And the goal is simple to say, but really demanding to do. Find that single option that delivers the absolute greatest value for money.
This slide really gives us the bird's eye view of the whole journey. Big public investment decisions, they aren't just made on a whim. They have to pass through these 5 gates. First, the strategic case asks, why? Then, the economic case, that's us today, asks which option gives us the best value. After that, the commercial case asks if the market can even deliver it. The financial case checks if we can actually afford it. And finally, the management case makes sure we have a plan to deliver it successfully. You see, each gate is a critical checkpoint, and the economic case is where we find our preferred way forward.
I love this way of thinking about it. The strategic case, that's what you see on the left, it basically defines the destination. It says, here's the problem, here are our objectives, and here's why we absolutely have to make this journey. But what it doesn't do is tell you how to get there. And that's the whole job of the economic case, which you see illustrated by all those branching paths. It's about exploring every alternative route, all the different ways we could solve the problem, and then putting each one under the microscope to figure out which path offers the greatest overall value.
So what on earth do we actually mean by value for money? Honestly, this is one of the most misunderstood ideas in public investment. Let's get one thing straight. It is not just about picking the cheapest option. In fact, the cheapest path often ends up being the most expensive in the long run. And it's not about the fastest fix either, or the one that just happens to be popular at the moment. The real definition, as you can see right here, is the option that delivers the greatest net social value over time, after adjusting for risk and uncertainty. Now that's a powerful idea. It means we have to look at everything, all the costs, all the benefits, all the risks, and the long-term impacts, not just the price tag you see on day one. And this funnel here shows you exactly how we find that value. See, economic appraisal isn't just guesswork, it's a systematic process of elimination. First, you generate every possible option you can think of. Then you develop those ideas into a credible long list.
From there, you have to narrow it down to a manageable shortlist of the most realistic contenders. It's only then that you bring in the heavy-duty economic analysis to really appraise them. And finally, right at the bottom of that funnel, one option emerges as the preferred way forward. This whole discipline makes sure every decision is built on solid evidence, not just a gut feeling. So, let's talk about that long list for a second. The entire point of this stage is just pure exploration. It's about thinking broadly, getting creative. As you can see here, solutions could be anything from simple operational tweaks or some new tech, all the way to entirely new service models, partnerships, or even just changing regulations. The goal here isn't to pick a winner yet, not even close. The goal is to cast the net as wide as you possibly can to make sure that no viable, innovative solution gets missed before the real number crunching begins. Okay, so after exploring that whole universe of possibilities, we narrow things down to the short list for the deep dive analysis. And this usually boils down to 3 core scenarios that give us a really powerful baseline for comparison. First, you've got the do nothing option. What happens if we just keep things exactly as they are? Second, the do minimum. What's the absolute least we can do to patch things up and meet our basic requirements? And third, the do something option. This is the big, transformational solution that's designed to nail all those strategic objectives we set out to achieve in the first place.
Now here's the thing. Evaluating these options properly takes more than just a spreadsheet. To get a true picture of economic value, you have to look at it through 3 different professional lenses. First up, you've got CIPFA, the public finance and accountancy experts who bring that financial and public value discipline. Then you have CIPS, the procurement and supply professionals who focus on whole life cost and what the market can actually deliver. And finally, you have PMI, the Project Management Institute, representing the folks who ask the really tough questions about whether we can actually deliver this thing. It's only when you bring all 3 of these perspectives together that you can really see what true value for money looks like.
So let's zoom in on that first lens, the CIPFA perspective, from the world of finance and accounting. From their point of view, the key is measuring value across time. They use these powerful tools like net present value, or NPV. Now, in simple terms, NPV just tells you what all the future money tied up in a project, both costs and benefits, is worth in today's money. It lets you compare different options on a totally level playing field. But, and this is critical, in the public sector, this isn't just about financial return. It's about social value and those wider public benefits. The ultimate goal is to maximize long-term value for all of society.
Mixed up is the CIPS perspective, which brings a massive dose of commercial reality from the procurement pros. They know something really important. The price you pay for something up front is almost never its true cost. They focus on what's called the total cost of ownership, or whole life costing. This includes absolutely everything: the initial purchase, the operations, the maintenance, any long-term supplier contracts, and even what it's going to cost to get rid of it at the end of its life. So an option that looks like a bargain today could turn into a huge financial headache down the road. This lens makes sure we see that full picture.
And finally, we have the PMI perspective, which is all about one thing: deliverability. Because let's be honest, a project that looks amazing on paper is completely worthless if you can't actually deliver it successfully. This is where project management expertise is so vital. They scrutinize the options for realistic scope, for feasible schedules, for whether we have the right people and resources, and for execution risk. If an option depends on crazy timelines or skills we just don't have, its supposed benefits are nothing but a fantasy. This perspective is what keeps the economic value from just collapsing during implementation. So, once we have our shortlist and our 3 expert lenses are in place, the real appraisal begins. Each of those shortlisted options is systematically picked apart across these key dimensions you see here: the costs, the benefits, the risks, the time horizons, and of course, those super important whole life impacts. This structured comparison lets the decision makers clearly see the pros and cons of each path, and it's all in service of one goal: to find out which option delivers the greatest overall value. And to do all that, analysts have a pretty powerful toolkit. We've already mentioned net present value, which gives you that total value in today's money. Then there's something called the benefit-cost ratio, or BCR, which basically just asks a simple question. For every pound or dollar we spend, how many do we get back in benefits? But what's really clever is the use of sensitivity and scenario analysis. These are basically the what-if tools. They let you stress test all your assumptions. What if costs go up? What if the benefits don't show up as expected? They help everyone understand just how robust each option is when it comes face-to-face with an uncertain future. So, you've got the process, you've got the expert lenses, you've got the tools. Everything looks solid, rational, buttoned up. But there is a huge psychological trap that derails more major projects than almost anything else. What do you think it is? It's this: optimism bias. It's the incredibly common human tendency to underestimate costs, underestimate how long things will take, and underestimate the risks of actually getting it done. This isn't just about bad luck. It's a well-documented behavioral bias that absolutely plagues large projects. In fact, it's so well known that the official UK Treasury guidance, called the Green Book, actually requires analysts to build in specific upward adjustments to their forecasts, forcing a dose of realism to fight back against our natural and often very expensive optimism.
And this bias tends to pop up in three main flavors. You've got financial optimism, where we lowball the project costs. There's supply market optimism, where we just assume we can buy what we need easily and cheaply. And then there's schedule optimism, where we imagine unrealistically short delivery timelines. And this is exactly where our three professional lenses become so incredibly important. The financial discipline from CIPFA, the procurement realism from CIPS, and the delivery discipline from PMI, they work together as a powerful antidote, making sure the economic case stays credible and grounded in the real world.
And believe me, the stakes here could not be higher. On one hand, you have a massive cautionary tale, like the NHS National Program for IT. Its economic appraisal was just totally disconnected from reality. It failed to grasp the enormous scale of the technical, delivery, and commercial challenges. The lesson was brutal. A brilliant idea on paper means nothing without a realistic path to deliver it. And then, in complete contrast, you have the London 2012 Olympic program. A project with insane complexity and a deadline that could not move. It's seen as a huge success precisely because that robust economic, commercial, and delivery thinking was baked in from day one, with really strong governance to keep the whole thing on track.
So after all of that rigorous analysis, all the testing, all the challenging of our own biases, one option finally comes out on top. It is the preferred way forward. And as this slide makes really clear, it's not necessarily the cheapest option or the fastest. It's the one that delivers the greatest value for money, creates sustainable long-term benefits, and, this is so important, has a realistic delivery pathway. This is the prize. Once you've identified the preferred way forward, it becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. The focus shifts from choosing the best option to planning exactly how to deliver it.
And that brings us to our final and kind of provocative thought. We've just gone through this entire exhaustive process to identify the single best option. But you know what? That's only half the battle. The economic case answers the question, which option? But it leaves another massive question just hanging there. Can the market actually deliver this solution effectively and at a fair price? And for that, we have to move on to the next gate in the 5-case model, the commercial case. So join us for the next explainer as we explore how strategic procurement and the realities of the market determine whether a great idea can ever become a reality.